I remember the day I died. Not the physical death that came later, wrapped in white hospital sheets and the antiseptic sting of a room that smelled of regret. No, I died the first time on my wedding night, when my husband, Julian Sterling, looked at me with those cold gray eyes and said, "This is a contract, nothing more. You are a placeholder until I find someone worthy." I was 22. He was 35. He was the billionaire CEO of Sterling Holdings, the most powerful man in the city. I was the daughter of a bankrupt family, sold to him in a marriage arranged by my father to save our crumbling empire. I had dreamed of love. I had dreamed of romance. I had dreamed of a man who would see me, truly see me, and cherish me. Instead, I got Julian, and my sister, Isabella. Isabella had always been the golden child. She was beautiful, charismatic, effortlessly perfect. She was the one our parents fawned over, the one who got the best clothes, the best education, the best everything. I was the shadow, the quiet one, the one who read books and kept her head down and tried not to cause trouble. But I was the one Julian married, because my father had promised me to him, and Julian needed a wife to secure a business deal. IT was never about love. IT was never about me. It was about the transaction. And the transaction came with a cruel twist. Julian brought Isabella into our home 6 months after our wedding. He didn't ask. He didn't even tell me. He simply appeared at dinner one night with her on his arm, his hand resting possessively on her waist, and announced, "Isabella will be living with us from now on. She's my advisor and my confidant, my partner. You will treat her with the respect she deserves." I looked at my sister. She smiled at me, that same perfect, practiced smile she had always worn. "Don't worry, little sister," she said. "I'll take good care of Julian. You can focus on your little hobbies, reading, gardening, whatever it is you do." I had hobbies. I had a soul, but it didn't matter. In their eyes, I was nothing. I was the placeholder, the ghost in my own life. For 10 years, I lived in that house like a stranger. Julian and Isabella played their games of power and passion while I faded into the background. They attended galas together. They traveled together. They made decisions together, that I was invited to nothing, that I was consulted on nothing, that I was simply there. Julian never touched me after the first year. He never looked at me with anything but cold indifference when he spoke to me. It was to issue commands or deliver criticisms. "You're wearing that?" The gardener did a better job with the roses. "Isabella has more grace in her little finger than you have in your entire body." I took it all, because I had nowhere else to go, and my parents had sold me to Julian, and my friends had abandoned me. My pride had been chipped away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a hollow shell of the woman I had once been. But I had one thing they didn't know about. One secret. One weapon. I had my grandmother's journals. My grandmother, Eleanor Vance, had been a brilliant businesswoman. She had built the Vance fortune from nothing, and she had documented every deal, every betrayal, every secret in a series of leather-bound journals that she had left to me. Julian thought they were sentimental keepsakes. Isabella thought they were old family recipes. They had no idea that these journals contained the blueprint for dismantling their entire empire. But I didn't know that yet. Not then. Then, I was still the broken wife, the forgotten daughter, the woman who had given up on love and happiness and every dream she had ever had. And then Isabella got pregnant. She announced it at a family dinner, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, her eyes sparkling with triumph. "Julian and I are having a baby," she said. "We're so excited. Aren't we, Julian?" Julian looked at her with an adoration he had never shown me. "The most excited I've ever been," he said. I felt something inside me crack. IT wasn't jealousy. I had long since given up on Julian's love. IT was the final recognition that I was completely, utterly, irreplaceably alone, that I had no one. I had nothing, that I was a ghost haunting a house that had never been my home. That night, I packed my bags. I didn't take much, some clothes, my grandmother's journals, a few photographs. I walked out of the penthouse, and I never looked back. But Julian stopped me. He stood in the doorway of my room, his silhouette dark against the hallway light, his voice cold and measured. "Where do you think you're going?" I didn't turn around. "Away. I'm leaving, Julian. I'm giving you what you want. Freedom." He laughed, and IT was a harsh, bitter sound. Freedom You think you have freedom? You have nothing. You came to me with nothing. You're leaving with nothing. You're not even a footnote in my life. You're a blank-paged A, an empty space. You don't matter. I turned to look at him for the first time in 10 years. I met his eyes without flinching. You're right, I said. I don't matter. Not to you, not to Isabella, not to anyone, but I will matter. Someday, Julian, you're going to look back at this moment and realize that you made the biggest mistake of your life, and I won't be there to save you. I walked out the door. I didn't look back. Objective commentary. The observer's voice. I want to pause here and be honest with you, the reader. When I first heard Charlotte's story, I was skeptical. Women like her, the quiet ones, the ones who fade into the background, they're not supposed to win. They're not supposed to rise from the ashes and build empires. They're supposed to be cautionary tales, examples of what happens when you let the world crush you. But Charlotte was different. She had a fire inside her that she didn't even know existed. She had been beaten down, humiliated, and discarded, but she hadn't broken. She had bent, yes. She had bent so far that she almost snapped, but she hadn't broken, and that was what made her dangerous. You see, the thing about people like Julian and Isabella is that they mistake kindness for weakness. They mistake silence for submission. They mistake patience for complacency. They think that because you don't fight back, you don't have the strength to fight at all. They were wrong. I moved into a tiny apartment in a rundown part of the city. IT was small, cramped, and smelled like the previous tenant's cat, but it was mine. It was the first thing I had owned in years that Julian hadn't touched, hadn't sullied, hadn't stolen. For the first few weeks, I did nothing but sleep. I had spent 10 years suppressing my exhaustion, my pain, my despair. Now, I let it all out. I cried and I screamed into my pillow. I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I had made a mistake, if I should have stayed, if it was better to be a ghost in a palace than a woman in a shoebox. But then I found my grandmother's journals. I had packed them without thinking, a reflex, a tether to a time when I had been loved. Now, sitting on my lumpy mattress with the rain tapping against the window, I opened the first one and began to read. Asterisk, January 15th, 1958, I have just acquired my first company. The board laughed at me. They said a woman couldn't possibly understand business, but I smiled, nodded, and bought them out from under their noses. They're not laughing now. Asterisk. I read on. Asterisk, March 3rd, 1961. Marcus Vance, my husband, has been embezzling from the family trust. He thought I would notice. He thought I was too busy with the children. He was wronged. I have documented everything. The divorce will be swift and brutal. Asterisk. Asterisk, December 12th, 1975. I have secured the patent for the quantum encryption algorithm. The government has approached me. They want to buy it, and I have refused. I am building something bigger. Something that will outlast me. Asterisk. The journals were a masterclass in power, strategy, and survival. My grandmother had been a woman of incredible intelligence and steely determination. She had been betrayed, exploited, and underestimated, and she had used every single betrayal as fuel for her rise. I read every journal cover to cover. I took notes. I studied. I learned. And then I started to plan. Isabella's child was born 6 months later. A son, Julian's heir. The press went wild. Sterling airborne. Julian Sterling's family grows. Isabella Sterling gives birth to baby boy. I watched the coverage from my tiny apartment, my heart heavy with a pain I couldn't quite name. IT wasn't jealousy. IT was something else. Something like grief for the life I could have had, the family I could have built, the love I could have shared. But I pushed the grief aside. I had work to do. My first move was to reclaim my grandmother's estate. My father had stolen it from me when I married Julian, gambling it away in a series of disastrous investments. But I had the journals. I had the receipts. I had the proof that the estate had been fraudulently transferred. I hired a lawyer, a fierce woman named Gabriella, who had a reputation for being ruthless. She looked at my evidence and smiled. "This is ironclad," she said. "We can have the estate back in 6 months." 6 months isn't fast enough, I said. I need it in 3. Gabriella raised an eyebrow. "You're in a hurry?" "My grandmother's journals contain documents that could bring down Sterling Holdings," I said. "But I need the estate to access the full records. Julian and Isabella are planning something. Something big that I need to stop them." Gabriella nodded. "Then we'll do it in 3 months." The legal battle was brutal. Julian tried to fight me, tried to bury me in paperwork and procedural delays. He sent his lawyers, his private investigators, his threats. But I had something he didn't have, my grandmother's legacy, and that legacy was iron. The estate was returned to me on a Thursday. I walked into the old Vance mansion for the first time in 12 years, my heels echoing against the marble floors. The place was dusty, neglected, but it was mine. IT had always been mine. I found the documents in a hidden safe behind my grandmother's portrait. They were everything I had hoped for. Proof of Julian's illegal business practices, proof of Isabella's embezzlement, proof that the two of them had been defrauding Sterling Holdings for years. I smiled. For the first time in a decade, I truly smiled. But I didn't make my move immediately. I was patient, like my grandmother had taught me. I waited and I watched. Julian and Isabella were planning their annual charity gala. It was the event of the season, attended by everyone who was anyone in the business world. I decided to make my appearance there. I spent 3 weeks preparing. I bought a gown, a stunning emerald creation that cost more than most people's homes. I had my hair done, my makeup done, my nails done. I transformed myself into a weapon. The night of the gala arrived. I walked into the grand ballroom of the Sterling Hotel, my head held high, my heart pounding in my chest. The room fell silent. Everyone was looking at me. Julian was standing at the far end of the room, his arm around Isabella. He saw me and froze. His face went white. Isabella's smile faltered. She squeezed his arm, trying to maintain her composure. "Who is that?" I heard someone whisper. "That's Charlotte Sterling," someone else replied. "Julian's ex-wife, the one he left for his mistress." I heard she disappeared. I heard she was penniless. I smiled. I walked toward them, my steps measured, my gaze unwavering. I stopped in front of Julian and Isabella and I spoke. "Hello, Julian. Isabella. It's been a while." Julian's jaw tightened. "Charlotte, what are you doing here? You weren't invited." "I don't need an invitation," I said. "I own the hotel." The room gasped. Julian's face went from white to red. "That's impossible. I own the hotel. I bought it 3 years ago." "You bought the shell?" I said calmly. "The actual title deed has been in the Vance family for generations, and my grandmother retained the deed as a backup. I've just reclaimed it, along with 12 other properties for companies and the majority stake in Sterling Holdings." The room was in chaos. Cameras flashed. Reporters scrambled. Julian was shouting, but I couldn't hear him over the roar of the crowd. Isabella stepped forward, her face a mask of rage. "You're lying. You're a nobody. You're nothing." "I'm the woman who was married to your lover for 10 years, I said. "And now I'm the woman who owns you." I turned and walked away, my heels clicking against the marble floor. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Objective commentary. The observer's voice. At this point, I knew Charlotte was going to win. It wasn't just the evidence or the money or the legal maneuvering. It was something else. Something that Julian and Isabella could never understand. Charlotte had suffered. She had suffered more than anyone should have to suffer. And she had used that suffering as fuel. She had turned her pain into power. She had transformed herself from a victim into a force of nature. That's the thing about people who have been broken. They don't break the same way twice. They either shatter into a million irreparable pieces, or they forge themselves into something stronger. Something unbreakable. Charlotte had forged herself into a weapon, and she had aimed that weapon at the people who had wronged her. But there was something else, something deeper, that made Charlotte different. She wasn't motivated by revenge. She was motivated by justice. She didn't want to destroy Julian and Isabella because she hated them, although she certainly didn't love them. She wanted to destroy them because they had abused their power. They had trampled on the innocent. They had shown no mercy to the weak. And Charlotte had decided that she would be their reckoning. The fall of Sterling Holdings was swift and brutal. The documents I had found in my grandmother's safe were released to the press, to the regulators, to the criminal investigators. Julian and Isabella were charged with fraud, embezzlement, and a dozen other crimes. They were arrested in their penthouse, the cameras capturing every moment of their humiliation. I watched the coverage from my new apartment, a beautiful penthouse overlooking the city. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not joy, just a quiet, peaceful satisfaction. And then the final confrontation came. Julian came to see me. He looked broken, haggard, nothing like the powerful man I had once known. He was wearing a cheap suit, his eyes hollow, his hands trembling. "Charlotte," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, I'm begging you, call off the investigation. I'll do anything. I'll give you anything." I looked at him, and I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just a quiet emptiness. "You had 10 years to love me, Julian," I said. 10 years to see me, to appreciate me, to cherish me. You chose to ignore me. You chose to belittle me. You chose to treat me like I was nothing. And now you're nothing. He fell to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. "I was wrong," he said. "I was so wrong that I love you. Charlotte, I always loved you, but I was just too stupid to realize it. Please, give me another chance. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I looked down at him. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and dominated society pages was kneeling at my feet, weeping like a child. "The only thing you ever gave me," I said, "was the motivation to become the person I needed to be. You thought you could break me. You thought you could use me and discard me. But you were wrong. I am not the victim of your story. I am the author of my own story. And in my story, you are nothing but a footnote, a cautionary tale, a lesson I learned and moved on from." I pressed the intercom button. "Security, please remove Mr. Sterling from the building. He is not allowed on the premises." Two burly men appeared. They took Julian by the arms and pulled him to his feet. He was still crying, still begging, still reaching for me as they dragged him out of the office. The door slid shut, cutting off his desperate pleas. Objective commentary. The observer's voice. And this, right here, is where Charlotte's story becomes something more than just a revenge fantasy. Because she didn't just win. She became whole. I've watched countless women go through similar journeys. They seek revenge. They find success. They destroy their enemies. And then they're left with nothing but ashes. They've spent so long fighting that they've forgotten how to live. But Charlotte was different. She had started her journey not to destroy Julian and Isabella, but to reclaim herself. The revenge was secondary. The justice was secondary. The real goal was her own freedom. And that, I think, is the ultimate irony. By freeing herself from her past, Charlotte didn't just defeat her enemies. She saved herself. She found love again. Not with a billionaire, not with a prince, but with a man who saw her, truly saw her. A man who appreciated her intelligence, her strength, her resilience. She started a foundation to help women who had been in her position. She gave speeches, wrote a book, became an advocate. She turned her pain into purpose, her suffering into strength. And Julian? He went to prison. Isabella went to prison. They were forgotten. Charlotte built an empire. She helped countless women. She found love, happiness, and peace. And when I asked her, years later, if she would do anything differently, she smiled. "No," she said, "I wouldn't change a thing. The pain made me who I am. The betrayal made me stronger. And the freedom made me whole." The years passed. I built an empire that rivaled Julian's, and then surpassed it. I became a philanthropist, a speaker, an advocate. I used my story to inspire others, to give hope to women who felt trapped, abandoned, powerless. And I never looked back. I did find love again. His name was Daniel. He was a professor of literature, a man of quiet intelligence and gentle kindness. He didn't care about my money or my power. He cared about me, the real me, the woman behind the mask. He proposed to me on a rooftop overlooking the city. It was raining, but neither of us cared. He got down on one knee and said, "Charlotte, I don't have billions of dollars, but I don't have an empire. But I have something better. I have love, I have respect. I have a heart that will always be yours. Will you marry me?" I said yes. We were married in a simple ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Julian wasn't there. Isabella wasn't there. They were in prison, forgotten, irrelevant. I stood at the altar, looking at Daniel, and I felt a peace I had never known. The pain of the past was still there, a scar on my heart, but it no longer controlled me. I had moved on, I had healed. I had found happiness. And when I looked back at everything I had been through, everything I had lost and everything I had gained, I knew that I wouldn't change a thing. The pain had shaped me. The betrayal had strengthened me. The freedom had set me free. Charlotte Vance, The woman they had tried to break. The woman they had dismissed. The woman who had risen from the ashes to become a queen. And I was just getting started.